Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Now today we're going to be discussing the topic of AI ethics, and this is another video in the series on AGI, which is artificial general intelligence. And this last week we talked about sort of the idea of AIs having sentience, and this week we're going to be covering the ethics of AI decision making. So it won't be really AI ethics on the ethics of creating certain AI. Obviously, we are going to cover a little bit on that, but I might talk about other ethical points of AI in a future video. But today's mostly on some of the decisions that AIs have to make, and how do they make them? How should they make them? As AI comes into many parts of our society, such as in just algorithms in our phone, to self-driving cars, to many other applications, we as a society need to discuss these implications and sort of what should they do and who's responsible when things go wrong. Laws need to be written, and sort of we need to discuss what needs to be done in certain cases. Technology often advances so fast that laws need to catch up, and this is sort of a concept that's like a vacuum chamber where there's a vacuum of lawlessness that basically even the companies, they don't really want a empty space as well. They want to know the rules that they should follow. Things like GDPR and DMCA, which is a very old law by now. Things that need to be dealing with technology need to be updated constantly, and also forward looking, because the field of technology, especially AI, is advancing so fast. And one of the biggest concepts that we're going to cover today is sort of the traditional problem of who's at fault. Now, traditionally, there's it's like user versus manufacturer. If the item comes broken and something happens, it's usually the manufacturer's fault. That's why there's recalls. And if, let's say, me as the user, I didn't follow the instructions, I didn't use it as intended, then it's my fault. Like a very notable example is like the MCAS system on the 737 Maxes caused several planes to crash and also other issues, and they had to recall that and fix the software, because traditionally software is programmatic. You tell it what to do, it will do it. Now, AI is more generative, as we have seen in things like ChatGPT and DALL-E, and we want them to also kind of learn like a human, and that's where AGI comes in. The idea that robots can start replacing humans in more general tasks. And when we have things like that, that is non-deterministic, now it's three different parties at play. There's the user of the AI, there's the manufacturer or the creator of the AI, but then there's the AI itself. Should we be held liable as users or manufacturers if the AI goes rogue, or if something in the programming, not just the programming code, but something in the training data causes it to go rogue because it's generating things that it shouldn't be generating? And also there's the schools of thought. What school of thought should AIs pick up? Kind of like consequentialism versus deontology. The idea of, should we look at the consequences or the actions to determine whether or not it did things right? And this is a very common ethical dilemma that people still debate. It's like philosophy. So there is no right answer in today's video, but it is important for us to look at these topics and discuss it, especially as AI is going to be making more and more of the decisions in life. So that's why we are going to be talking about this subject today, especially in relation to AGI. Now let's start with one of the most famous ethical problems that you probably have heard of as well, and that is the trolley problem. And the trolley problem is a series of thought experiments that basically asks people, what would you do in this situation? And the basic problem is there's a guy near the train track and there's a lever, and you can pull this lever to move the train from one track to the other. Right now the train is heading down at high speeds, it cannot stop, and it's going to hit 5 people. Should you pull the lever so that it goes on another track and hit 1 person? Now this is a very very hard ethical decision, and most of the respondents do pull the lever. I believe in the case was like 90% of respondents chosen to kill 1 and save the 5. And usually that is because we think that the idea of the consequence, it's better to have killed 1 person versus killing 5 people, because 1 is greater than 5. And then we have the ideas of, what if that 1 person is older, or if the 5 people are old and 1 person is young, what do we do in that situation? Or the idea of, hey, maybe I should just not touch the lever, because then by touching the lever, I'm involving myself in this situation. If I don't touch it, the train goes by itself, right? So there's a lot of different answers to this question, and there is no right answer. And this has a lot of implications for autonomous vehicles, which we're going to go to right after this. The idea is, what should the autonomous car do? Should it hit the 5 people, or should it hit 1 person? And it needs to make these decisions fast, because it would ideally not encounter these problems, but there are situations where the vehicle has to decide whether or not to go straight or swerve off. And this kind of question was asked by MIT Media Lab with their Moral Machine. And basically, it was a website that was run to collect human input on what to do. And we can take a look at this. What should the self-driving car do? Should it go straight and kill 2 cats, or should it go veer off to the side and kill the 2 humans, one of which is a doctor? And there are multiple different questions. I'm just going to choose a random one right now. And there are multiple different questions that sort of asks, who should we kill in which situation? Now, ideally, the robot should, or the car should be in a safe situation at all times. It should be able to basically be able to brake. I think that's one of the things that isn't really covered. But obviously that goes against the ethical dilemma, because we want to be 2 bad situations rather than, hey, you can just brake and save everyone, or save as many lives as we can. And there's also another version of this. It's the absurd trolley problems. I recommend you to go try this out as well. This basically gets more and more absurd, and it's a little bit more fun and enjoyable, and it also still is ethical decisions. Now, why are we talking about the trolley problem? It's because there's a lot of robot cars on the road, and this example of a robot car death was because of human error, and this was Uber incident back in, I believe, 2018 or 2019. And it was because the person who was on the phone, person who was supervising the AI, was on their phone and not paying attention to the road. But there are things like Waymo, which is completely driverless on the road, which makes us need to think about who's at fault. Is it Waymo's fault? Is it the passenger's fault for requesting the ride to go to that location? Or is it the AI's fault in this case? And things like Tesla also talking about how their vehicles are much, much safer in terms of than regular driving. But at the same time, we all feel not as secure when an AI is making that decision to drive on the road, and then making that decision what to do and how to handle emergency situations, such as should it run over two cats or two people, or should it run into the barrier and kill the passengers or the people on the road. So yeah, that's the trolley problem. It is very difficult and a very common ethical dilemma that people discuss. A second question that could possibly come up is regarding lifeboats. Now, you probably remember the story of the Titanic, which is a ship that basically ran into an iceberg and sank. And as it was sinking, people realized there was not enough lifeboats on the ship. Now, in modern day ships, there's usually more than enough lifeboats, life vests, but still, there are probably situations in which we need to decide, who to save. And in the Titanic, at least in the stories, I'm not sure. I think it probably was implemented in the policy. They allowed women and children to go on lifeboats first. And that is a decent policy, and people can debate whether or not that is fair or unfair. But the idea is now we have potentially an AI system that needs to decide who gets to go on this lifeboat. And we might have more information about the people, like their past history, things that the profile of the person. And as we get into those details, it might become an ethical decision whether or not it is even legal or ethically, morally good to sort of give the people who are, quote, better citizens in the data more priority. And that is a very, very, very very scary ethical decision, and that is one that we need to talk about and discuss, because there might be a situation where the AI needs to decide that. The third case of AI making ethical decisions is in prison, and specifically prison sentencing. And I think in the past, prison terms are usually done by jury. You get a trial by jury, and the jury decides in conjunction with the law, how many years or what your punishment is for the crime that you have committed. And now there are situations where AI robots are going to be deciding that, especially with the rise of things like AI lawyers, or other, even you can ask ChatGPT, like, hey, in this situation, who's in the wrong, right? And when an AI robot is making those decisions, it is much more important that we make sure that it makes a good and ethical decision, because before it fell upon 10, 15, 20 people of the jury, and now it will fall upon robots. And we need to impart good ethical decisions onto these robots when they make their decisions. And there are things like AI sentencing people based on their, quote, risk assessment, and whether or not you think that's fair. Should we sentence someone who is more at risk of doing bad things for longer, and people who are less at risk of doing bad things for shorter terms? Is that necessarily fair? And that is a very good question, because that's probably something that the jury also thinks about. But the difference is that I think a lot of people think it's much different, because in one case it is humans we are deciding, and in another case, it's sort of this black box AI that's deciding our fates, and that is kind of scary, especially if it doesn't have the right ethical mindset. And another article saying AI is sending people to jail and getting it wrong, and basically using historical data to train risk assessment tools could mean that machines are copying mistakes of the past. And that is very true, because when you are training on past data, it really only knows about the past data. And if in the past, if the data is biased, then the result is that the machine will be biased. And the idea of sort of removing bias, I think we're going to talk about that in a future video, but that is very important that we make sure that the AI bot is unbiased. But at the same time, there are situations where we go too far and make it too unbiased. It's not too unbiased, it is biased in the other way, right? Like we are saying you can't talk about things because we don't feel comfortable about talking about these things. So then so that is another ethical decision that we need to make. Now, a fourth hypothetical situation is in the hospital. And right now, humans are making the decisions as well. Specifically, we're talking about the triage. And the idea of triage is to sort and prioritize people based on their needs. And because in a hospital, it's very busy, and there are different levels of people who need help. For example, I can go to the hospital and I just have a cold. My needs aren't really as important, I think, than someone who's actively bleeding out and about to die. So that's why triage is very important in the hospital, and right now it's handled by humans. But then, so this is this sort of the chart that they follow, and then every hospital has their own sort of chart. But then there's level 1, which is the patient dying? Things like cardiac arrest, respiratory arrest, things like that. And those things need immediate attention. As I said before, if someone's actively bleeding out and they're probably going to lose all their blood in the next couple minutes, you should probably go to them instead of checking out my sore throat. And then there's level 2, sort of high risk situation. Is it a patient that can't wait? You know, things like being confused, severe pain, distress, active chest pain, which may be a sign of a heart attack soon. You should probably tend to them before the people who are less vital. You know, things like vital signs. If my heart rate is normal, blood pressure is normal, that's probably not as important as someone who is, you know, high blood pressure, someone who's having high heart rate, someone who might go into cardiac arrest. And then, so basically that is triage. And the idea is now we might hand it off to AI. We give it the profile of the patient. We tell it, hey, it's, you know, they're bleeding out, you know, doing this, doing that. Then it needs to decide who gets treatment first. And in a lot of cases, it's pretty cut and dry, you know, if it's between someone who's bleeding out and sore throat. But then there are things like someone who is internally bleeding, and then someone who has, you know, who is confused, you know, different symptoms. A lot of times medical doctors have to make that call, and sometimes they might get it wrong because, you know, honestly, it's hard. It's hard figuring out what the problems of the people are. And when we hand this job to robots and AI, we need to make sure that they are making the best decisions so that people get the help that they need. Finally, the last ethical decision is war. And this is a dark one, and the reality is AI is probably going to be used for war, because it's just better than sending humans, I guess. and it's kind of sad that because war is something that isn't inherently um, makes sense in terms of rationality. It's just pure destruction, and usually nothing good comes of it. Obviously, there's probably a winner and a loser, and that's why people would rather send robots in to fight. But then we get situations like the Terminator, where the AI goes rogue and decides to turn on all humans instead of listening to a particular country or a particular group of humans to target another group of humans. It just, hey, let's just kill everyone, right? And in the movie, like the War Games, the AI was connected to the nukes and was deciding on, whether or not to nuke. In this is talking about during the Cold War, if the U.S. should nuke the USSR. And that is a very, very big decision because of the idea of mutual destruction. If we shoot nukes over there, they are going to shoot nukes back and nobody lives, basically. And the AI in this movie basically comes to the conclusion that this game is very strange because the only way to win is to not play. So yeah, AI in war they need to make the decision of who to kill, what targets to do, and then we need to make the decisions of whether or not it's even ethical building AI into war machines. But that is a very important discussion to have. The thing is, people are probably doing it right now, unfortunately. So yeah, that is the episode today, basically talking about a few traditional ethical problems that machines need to think about, and we as a society need to sort of discuss, what is the right decision and when. Because AI is honestly going into everything, and we need to start thinking about who's gonna be at fault, what and sort of what should the AI decide? What philosophical theory should it hold? Whether or not, like, utilitarianism is usually what a lot of humans hold, is we want to do good for the most amount of people that we can. But then there are theories like, if all of our actions are good, then the consequences aren't really our fault. If we uphold a good ethical moral, all of our actions follow our morals, then maybe we aren't at fault. So this is a philosophical discussion that has been going on for a long time, ever since like Greek philosophers. So right now we should discuss this in the context of AGI and AI. So I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned some of the ethical dilemmas and sort of start thinking about it and what you think, in your opinion, is the right, ethical thing to do. Hope you enjoyed the video. Like the video if you did. Comment below if you have any thoughts on these ethical theories. And make sure to subscribe and share this video with others. And I will talk to you later. Bye-bye.